Broadcasting live from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, this is The Metro, a slice of news, culture, and conversation. I'm producer Kerry Jr. II, and today on the program, we'll be listening back to some of our favorite conversations over the last few days. We've discussed DTE Energy's rate hikes and what you can do about it. A former commercial pilot and aviation historian joined the show to talk about the string of airplane crashes we've been seeing. Plus, we spoke with a small business owner about the economic blackout in early March and the importance of shopping locally. All of that and more on The Metro. It's The Metro on WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm producer Kerry Jr. II, and I'll be here with you throughout the hour to listen back to some of our favorite conversations. We're going to start with one about shopping locally. In early March, an economic blackout went viral on social media, and it encouraged people to avoid shopping at major companies. So Metro hosts Tia and Robin spoke with a local business owner to discuss her model and why it's so important to shop at locally owned businesses. Take a listen.
Last week, the grassroots group People's Union US called on Americans to boycott major corporations and only spend money at small independent businesses. The People's Union wants to unite Americans to regain control of the economy, the government, and the country's future. And they say to do this, people have to oppose and expose the industries, the corporations, the politicians who've built what they say is an exploitative economy that keeps people in a state of struggle.
So did local businesses feel some benefits from the recent boycott? As some Americans use their wallets to show their beliefs, we're talking about the impact locally owned businesses have on our communities. Joining us now is Rachel Lutz. She is the owner of the boutique, The Peacock Room. Rachel, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great discussion.
Oh, thank you so much so far. Number one, love your glasses. You said they were from a small business.
Yeah, I got my glasses from Tina at Spectacle Society in Corktown, and she got these from a second-generation woman-owned business in Paris. So that's an example of how those dollars keep reverberating, not just, when you shop small, like your small boutiques also support other small businesses too. So thank you. I love my glasses and
What
I love
is the
Spectacle
shape?
Society.
What do we call that shape?
The cat eye.
The cat eye, and they're sparkly.
Yes. Nice.
Okay.
I was going to say nice, Robin, for describing it, but they're just gorgeous.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, how did the Peacock Room come to be?
So I actually wanted to open a store. I knew it was going to be in Detroit. I'm a third-generation Detroit retailer. And I didn't know what it was going to sell, which is usually a key part of a business plan. But living in Detroit since the late 90s, I felt through my experience and anecdotally that the city needed more clothing boutiques. And there was a DEGC study that I saw in 2010 that backed that up. Detroiters spent $200 million that year outside of Detroit on groceries. On apparel, they spent $310 million outside of Detroit. I think that number's probably gotten bigger as online shopping has become more of a thing.
I mean, that's one of the things I complain about often is there aren't the shops or bigger stores that we do for retail in clothing in the city of Detroit. You have to often go out of Detroit and your dollars are going with you outside of Detroit.
That's right.
Yeah, I think about that often. So what does it mean for you to have a locally owned business, especially in Detroit, like you said, third generation owner here?
Second generation Fisher Building tenant and Park Shelton tenant. My parents used to live in this neighborhood. I was an intern in this area at this station years ago in the 90s.
Shout out.
So I wanted to go where I know. I felt like I knew this area and I knew what people wear, what their needs were, what their budgets were. So I really, you know what? I opened the store because I hate shopping and I don't like what the shopping process has become. So this was my little act of protest and public service to the people in the city and to the mostly ladies of Metro Detroit. And I wanted to capture those dollars. Every dollar we spend, it's not partisan, but it is political. Every dollar is political. And I'm going to explain what that means. your dollar ends up somewhere. Who does it end up with? Where does it end up? What is it paying for? Are you supporting modern day slave labor? Are you supporting poisoning streams? Because you're buying from things produced in countries that don't have the laws or the enforcement that we have. There are even companies with higher standards than the U.S. I will politely shout out Canada. And, some European countries, really have much stricter standards when it comes to labor and the environment than we do. So, all of these things, I know that a lot of boutique owners don't think about this. A lot of major retailers certainly don't care about this. But because of my social justice background, I really try to be very conscious of where those dollars end up and educating people about them. I think that in this climate right now, in this cultural climate in America right now, in this moment, I think more people are starting to pay attention of, wait a minute, how do so few people have so many vast amounts of wealth, and how can we begin to dismantle that? How can we begin to change that? And it really starts with each and every one of us. We've created these pockets of wealth. We've voted for these systems that have concentrated wealth into few hands, and it is within our control to slow the trend, if not reverse it, but we have some lifestyle changes to make.
Oh, do we ever have lifestyle changes to make? Robin, we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
The convenience factor. The convenience factor.
That is a way of modern life. Convenience is part of modern life. I do it too. I'm going to break down for you my own personal household spending.
Okay.
So I am a huge, shop small, shop local advocate. I would say that less than 10% of our shopping ends up in big box hands. Less than 10%. We are a 1-car, 2-person household. 2 pets, I would like to add. But we buy even our pet food. We don't buy it from a mega conglomerate. We usually get it from, there's a place next to K9 to 5 on Cass here. There's a pet food store locally, or Premier Pet. So there are some local franchises. We do a little bit of delivery. We had previously done Target delivery. We do some Kroger. But I would say 90% of our grocery shopping is done in Eastern Market, right by us. So that money goes directly to the farmers who actually raise my food, or it goes to a reseller. But those resellers are local. And Rachel, really quickly to jump in, how do you get folks to start to think a little bit more consciously when they are shopping now? Like, how do you, because I hear what you're saying, and I would love to start to model some of those things, but where do people begin to even get out of their own way in terms of convenience and just making sure that you're shopping safely ethically for our country? You know what? I would argue that the idea that online shopping is more convenient, I'm gonna actually argue with that and say it's falsely so in a lot of cases. And let me walk you through that. So when you come into the Peacock Room, my boutiques, you are able to take 10 things, 20 things into a fitting room, try them on, walk out excitedly with a thing that works. When my industry has the online shopping of women's clothing usually has a return rate of 60 to 80%. So if you were to try on those 10 or 20 dresses, you're even trying on what I'm kind of editing for you. When you're left to your own devices and you don't really know what you're looking for, you're looking at what the algorithm is feeding you. You're looking at, beautiful Photoshop pictures. Yeah, you're nodding your head. You've done this. I know you've done this. No, I'm saying the Photoshop pictures get me Photoshop angry. The AI now. These are not even models that even exist in real life now. You're seeing an idea of a model. So if you were to buy a dress online, and we get these women who come into my shop all the time, I tried online first and I didn't have the time. So I went on my phone and I bought all these dresses and I had to return them all, and then I had to buy more of them, and I felt crummy about my body because nothing works. And because you had no one to help you. You had no way to feel the fabric or how it lays or how it moves on you, how it fits on you. That Amazon box is not going to tell you if your butt looks good in that dress, but a real person will. So, did these women save time? I would say no. They took a 20-minute drive to my store and they were able to see in person what they wanted and walk out with it. So that could have cost them 40 minutes total instead of the 3 hours that they invested trying to find a dress on the internet. And not to mention a lot of the clothing on Shein, Temu. Oh, do we really want to have this conversation? Because I'm about to.
We don't have enough time.
I was going to wish we did, because I'm the person right now. I'm trying my best not to do TikTok shop.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
All right. I won't mention the carcinogens and the hormone disruptors.
Oh, my Lanta. You know what?
Not only that, it's ending up in the ocean and
ending up in the
landfills
ocean in Ghana and Haiti.
That's right.
Ruining their manufacturing economies. It's very so. There's a really great documentary called The True Cost. If you want to learn more about fast fashion, but that's a good example of how we've never known so much and so little about what we buy online.
Oh, my gosh,
Yeah.
Rachel. We're actually going to go to the phones right now. We have Nia in Redford. Hi, Nia. How do you shop locally?
Hi. Well, I'm really happy to hear you have Rachel Lutz on, because I do shop at the Peacock Room. Great store for beautiful gifts, jewelry, clothing, all of which I have bought there.
Oh, thank you.
I also am a huge supporter of small businesses, and especially women-owned businesses, and I like to support the Helium Studio in Wayne. Unfortunately, they are closing, but they've been a great little boutique for the past 9 years out in Wayne. I had gave up big box shopping many years ago when I noticed how they were detrimental to communities and small family-owned businesses. And I did not like that they put up a Walmart not far from me, and it shut down the local IGA. So I just made it my own personal principle to try not to shop. And I definitely do not shop Amazon. I'm boycotting them for the past 3 or 4 years. I'm able to find things in small shops elsewhere. And books that you mentioned earlier, I like shopping at Literati in Ann Arbor, and also Schuler Books in Grand Rapids is who I shop from online for books.
Nia in Redford, thank you so much for calling this morning and letting us know how you shop locally. Now, we're listening to the Metro. You're listening to the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking to Rachel Lutz of the Peacock Room about the value of locally owned businesses, and we want to hear from you. How often do you shop at locally owned businesses, and why? Call us at 313-577-1019 and let us know. And let's stay with the phones. Mark in Rochester, I understand you own a restaurant. What impact has your restaurant had on the surrounding community?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon or late morning. So my name is Mark Mendola. I own DeMarco's Italian Restaurant in downtown Rochester. And I really enjoyed the past discussion, and it's very similar with the restaurant industry. I believe that whether it's downtown shopping or whether it's your locally owned and family-owned restaurant, that's important to keep a community vibrant. And I often see where you see great communities where there's great shopping, people can go get some coffee or a great dinner or even just a dessert at a locally owned restaurant or cafe goes a long way to create a greater vibrancy and experience and just a better community sense. So just like the last caller talked about big box retailers, there's also big box chains. And although they may employ people locally, they don't reinvest back into the community like so many other restaurants that are locally owned and do that. So we're very philanthropic in terms of giving back to the local schools and communities where we work and live. And I know that that's a big difference because we feel obligated to support our community. And I'm not so sure that that's the way that some of the big restaurant chains feel. So
Mark,
just like it was big box retailers, we feel the same with restaurants.
Mark, thank you for talking to us about your community ethos. I'm wondering, before we let you go very quickly, how's business been?
Well, it's tough. I think that our consumers are seeing the same things that our restaurants see, which is like higher inflationary pricing. You see wage rates increasing, uncertainty in the market. I also own a Mexican tequila bar. The tariffs in Mexico will have a significant impact on tequila and avocado. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure we don't pass that inflationary cost to our customers. But it's harder. And that is why, again, this is the whole spirit of your show right now, is we encourage everyone to come in, buy locally. So whether that's a retail store, a small boutique store, or even a restaurant, it goes a long way, and we sure could use your help.
Mark, thank you so much for giving us a call. Rachel, did you want to respond to Mark?
Mark, first of all, I've been to your restaurant. It's amazing. Thank you. I hope people tip all of your folks very well. I will also give a back of the house insight. When you eat at a big box chain restaurant, contrary to Mark's, a lot of those major companies, I don't know, like TGI Fridays, like those big chains, they've started privatizing their own distribution of food systems. So there are, Mark may get his produce from Eastern Market or the Fort Street Produce Terminal, but a lot of those chains have taken their own dollars and built their own distribution systems outside of communities. So it's not just when you walk into the business, those dollars that you're affecting, you're also you're supporting that back end supply chain of a chain. So just to think about how complex these things are.
Rachel, that's such a great point. That makes me think of the restaurants that I've worked at in the past, and they were always locally owned restaurants. And I was always struck by the fact that most of the produce, most of the meats and the different things that were ingredients in the dishes we were making were coming from local vendors. And it's fair to say you can't say that same thing about corporatized restaurants. Now, Rachel, this also has me thinking about your thoughts on the so-called economic blackout that happened last week.
Let's talk about it.
Do you think it helped your business? Because we'll remind listeners. So this was a grassroots effort, and the message was don't shop at big corporations. And if you need or want to shop, do it at small local businesses and do it with cash. What did you see?
I was actually really pleased. We had several customers come in that day and cited that boycott and said, I am intentionally shopping small today. I'm paying with cash. That was to, prevent the 3% surcharge that a lot of us pay for credit card processing, also to, hit the banking industry. Here's what I say. I think that boycott had great intention. Let's turn it into a lifestyle. I don't think that a lot of these big corporations really notice it for a day. I think that where you really impact, okay, congratulations, you put your Amazon shopping cart on hold for a day. Are you willing to cancel that subscription? Are you willing to, people sat at lunch counters. Are you willing to change where you buy your toilet paper? Can you do that? So really think about the lifestyle changes that we can make to make a big impact. It's not going to be a day out of the year. It's going to be shop local all the time, shop Black-owned businesses all the time, shop women-owned businesses all the time. Look at historically disadvantaged populations. How can you financially support? If you are wanting to boycott Target because you're upset about what they did with their DEI initiatives,
Which is that they unraveled them, essentially.
They unraveled them, but, how often do you intentionally shop Black-owned businesses? Or did you just sit that out because you saw, a graphic online talking about it? No, really think about, okay, well, what can I do to actively support Black-owned businesses? For example, you can be a member of the Michigan Black Business Alliance, like I am, and be an ally member. So don't just look at these little purchases of a lipstick here and there, some toilet paper, some hand soap, really, how can you take your hard-earned dollars and how can you use them as small acts of justice?
Small acts of justice. I will say that there are some more boycotts planned, and they will take place over several days. But what I'm hearing from you is you're saying people don't need to wait for a boycott. They can just change their behaviors now.
I don't need to boycott Walmart because I won't walk into Walmart. I don't like how they've treated their employees. That's something that's always bothered me. So I just don't step foot in there. There are certain restaurant chains I will never step foot in because I just don't. And I'm not going to, I don't want to get into what my personal values are. I want people to think about what their values are. And if you shop regularly at a big box business, just kind of look into who they support, what their employee culture is. Do they have a high turnover? Do the employees seem happy there? Those are the companies that I will shop at. But the companies that don't align with my personal values, it's simple. There are so many consumer options out there. I just look somewhere else. And when I shop small, I don't have to think about that too much because I know who those dollars are going to. It's often the owner behind the counter or, a family member. You don't really have to, where your money's going when you shop small. And it's pretty significant. So the less you shop at these big box stores, the less you have to think about or research where your dollars end up concentrated.
And quickly, Rachel, before we do let you go, unfortunately, we're running out of time here, but I just want you to talk just a little bit, once again, give a little tips if you can for folks like myself who I haven't shopped at Target in almost 2 months, and I'm losing my mind a little bit because I was an avid shopper of Target.
So, are you saving money?
I am saving a lot of money, a lot of time. I've been shopping more strategically. Shout out to Robin for also giving me tips here and there to help shop in certain places. So, what tips do you give folks who want to just begin?
Be intentional. I mean, being a one-car household, in fact, I lived in the city without a car for 5 years. It taught me to be real intentional with where I shop and what I buy. I really had to think okay, do I really want to rent a zip car or take a bike ride to buy this thing? And oftentimes the answer was, I could probably do without that. So I would say buy less stuff. I'm telling you as a shop owner, buy less stuff. Buy secondhand. It's great for the environment. It's thrifty. You can use things until the end of their life cycle and buy better stuff. Look at your cost per use or cost per wear. Like the dress that I'm wearing, I throw this in the washer and dryer. I've worn it probably at least 20 times. I own multiple clothing stores and my own clothing rod is probably about 3 feet wide. So you don't have to spend more when you shop small. I would actually argue that if you really change your lifestyle, you can spend less, be happier, and have less stuff to think about, and fewer regrets of where your dollars end up.
Rachel Lutz is the owner of the Peacock Room. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we'll listen back to a conversation about how one local chef observes Ramadan. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm Kerry Jr. II. Ramadan is in full swing, so we spoke with a local chef about some of the cultural traditions that are observed during this time. Let's take a listen.
Now we want to turn to the holy month of Ramadan, which began Friday at sunset. There are a lot of different ways to celebrate Ramadan and a lot of foods to eat, to bask in the holy month. During the iftar meal, that's when people break their fasts.
That's right, Robin. In Detroit, America, and around the world, people celebrate the holiday with food. And so in this conversation, we want to hear from you. Call in and tell us, what are you eating for Ramadan? The number on the line is 313-577-1019. And to discuss Ramadan and what it means to him and the special dishes he's cooking up for the month-long celebration, we have Chef Omar Anani here. He owns Saffron de Trois, a Moroccan restaurant in Detroit. Chef Anani, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. So before getting deep into the cuisines, what does Ramadan mean to you?
Ramadan is a time of reflection, gratitude, and deep connection. It's not just to faith, but to community and tradition. It's a time to slow down and be intentional, to practice self-discipline, and to remember those who have less. Growing up, Ramadan was about more than just the fasting. It was about families coming together at sunset, people breaking bread together, generosity, and sharing meals, and all that carried generations of history and meaning. In my work, I try to capture that through my experiences of food and where I come from.
And just throwing in a personal little tidbit, I grew up in the border of Detroit and Dearborn and had that early understanding of what Ramadan meant and understanding of the cultural impact. So for you personally, how does it set you up for the rest of the year when you have this time to slow down and reflect, and then, the month's over? What do you come out of as? How do you feel afterwards?
Honestly, what's funny is that every year I think I learn something new from the fast. I think I learn something new about myself. And as people, we grow throughout life, right? And I think every year we're up against new challenges or changes or decisions to be made in life. And that time actually really helps us just sit back and take things in.
Yeah. And how does your restaurant, the rituals you have going on there, and your work change during Ramadan? What are some things that people will notice are different?
I think we keep the same menu. We do a lot of specials. The hours stay the same. What you'll notice, I think, is that it's a little bit quieter, and then it comes alive at sunset, and the restaurant's much, much busier. And the cool thing is, you can see people come together at mosques, and you'll see all these different cultures and cuisines just bringing food together because, there's so many different types of Muslims from so many different places. And then as people who are outside of this that want to partake, right, they get to go to all these local restaurants that we have, and they're all doing different specials, and they have platters, and they have take-home meals and all this really cool stuff.
Literally, that was that's the thing. Growing up where I grew up, you were able to experience it as well. I was able to experience that. Worked at Planet Fitness. I worked overnight at midnights, and it was during Ramadan. And I just remember every night I had a meal because it was community coming together into the gym, and we had food every single night because they made sure that they fed us in that community. And I was just thinking to myself, like, this is what I mean about community coming together and breaking bread together. And this is what I would love to see happening across the state of Michigan. So when we talk about Saffron de Trois, a few years ago, Celebrate Ramadan, you made a special Mexican-style iftar meal, which is the meal that breaks the fast. What kinds of dishes are you making at your restaurant to celebrate this year?
I love creating dishes that honor tradition while embracing new influences and things that are important to me. This year, we are running a couple of different specials, and I actually have a chef coming out from D.C., and we're going to be doing a Palestinian pop-up throughout some of the nights of Ramadan because that is a part of my background and my heritage, and the new restaurant will be Palestinian. So for us to be able to feature some of those dishes and have a lot of fun with the cuisine and give people other options, as well as doing things like every culture has their own dishes that's traditionally like their Ramadan dish. Like in Morocco, harira is the big one, the soup, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like the really filling, amazing dish that people have. But universally, there's really cool things like, everyone breaks fast with a date. That's the go-to. That's how you break your fast. You eat a date, you go do your prayer, and then you come back, and then you eat your actual dinner.
Like a literal date?
Just a literal date.
The best tasting date you've ever had.
Yes.
At first, my brain, I was going like, are we going out on a date? No, you're talking about eating a date. Oh, wow. Like, I have so many questions. But I do want to ask you about what is or what would you consider a traditional Palestinian dish?
Oh, man, there's so many. So for me, my favorite dishes growing up were always msakhan, maqlube, all the mahashi. We're known for Palestinians love stuffing rice and meat inside of vegetables. And so like that's the big thing, whether it's a squash, a zucchini, a carrot, a potato, you name it, we stuff it with rice and vegetables. One of the world's first dumplings comes from Palestine. It's called shish barak. And we love making that at the restaurant as well.
What is it? What are the ingredients?
So it's a lamb dumpling. And traditionally it's dropped into a yogurt stew and it cooks in this yogurt stew. We do it a little bit differently. Everything for us is more of a modern take. And I think that every country has perfected a way of doing something. And I love the crispy skirt on an Asian dumpling. So we cook it that way. And then we take the yogurt stew and we thicken it up into a dipping sauce. So you get the crispy bottom of the dumpling, you get to dip it into the sauce, and you get the whole experience in a little bit different format.
Oh, my gosh. I'm just thinking about how amazing that possibly tastes. Oh, my gosh. Okay. The last time that you were on the show, you talked about the East Warren Corridor being a really interesting place for playing with a mixture of cuisines. We're seeing it grow. Where does the corridor sit, and how has it changed over time?
I think the corridor is constantly changing and growing as the landscape constantly changes and grows. And the neighborhood is absolutely amazing. The people there are amazing. And you see these new buildings coming up, and it's funny because I was telling someone the other day, driving down East Warren now compared to driving down East Warren 10 years ago, it's like you're in a different place altogether.
I thought the same thing driving down East Warren not too long ago. It's just like, holy cow, where am I? But it's a beautiful thing to see the development and transformation happening, especially on a different part of the city of Detroit. We always hear about the West, this part of downtown, but rarely do you hear about the cool things that are happening on the East Side. So that's amazing. You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're speaking with Chef Omari Anani about what dishes he's making at Saffron des Trois to celebrate Ramadan. We also want to hear from you. Call in and let us know what your favorite thing to eat when you break the fast during Ramadan. The number is 313-577-1019. Chef Anani, you're Egyptian and Palestinian, and you interact with Muslims whose lineages stretch from around the world. What are some of the different ways that you see Ramadan celebrated just around Southeast Michigan?
Yeah, so I think, like I said earlier, we have so many different diverse communities here. Yeah. And the cool thing is you get to see them all come together in one place and break bread together. And so while each people, like, in South Asia, you're going to see a lot of biryani and a lot of samosas and those types of things. And then in North Africa, they have their dishes. And in the Middle East, they have their dishes. And but it's not about the food. It's about the connection and nourishing not just the body, but the soul, and bringing people together to break bread.
Yeah, that's a beautiful notion to marinate on here for a moment. And we can't talk about Ramadan without talking about the people of Gaza right now. There have been over 40,000 people killed and millions displaced by Israel's response to the Hamas attacks, which killed about 1,200 in that country. I've been seeing these stunning images of people preparing to break their fast in Gaza. I saw this long table amid the rubble. I mean, just an absolute devastating contrast. How has the death and destruction shaped the way that you are thinking about Ramadan and celebrating the holidays?
I think the purpose of Ramadan for us, it really shows in Gaza, when you see people who are so steadfast in their belief and in their faith, that no matter what, they can never be broken. They can never be displaced from their homes. They can never have things taken away from them. And the whole point of us fasting is to feel what the less fortunate feel, right? And so yesterday I was telling someone, man, I really have a headache. And they go, oh, well, you can break your fast if you medical exemptions, right? And I'm like, people in Gaza went months without food and water. And like, I can't deal with a headache for another 3.5 hours. No, well, I'll be okay. But again, just seeing how people come together at a time that's so important to us, it's a beautiful thing, regardless of the situation where you're at, in the middle of a war zone and in the middle of a field. It's absolutely beautiful to see.
Has it brought you comfort this holy month of Ramadan more than perhaps others in the past, because of the suffering, the destruction, the devastation that we know of in Gaza?
The destruction and devastation is still happening.
Yes.
And I think for me, being able to see how resilient they are, being able to see how strong they are, it makes my problems in life very minuscule. It makes me realize that, hey, maybe what I'm dealing with really isn't that big of a deal because I have a roof over my head. I have running water. There's not bombs dropping down over top of me. And so you see these little kids going through these things, and it eats you up as a human. It hurts.
Chef Anani, I'm wondering if the foods that you make have changed over the past 2 years. Do you try to make more comfort foods, for example, to try and soothe people, those who are feeling on a cellular level the pain and the trauma, receiving news of the destruction and the violence in Gaza?
You know, it's actually funny. A chef's most hated question is, what's your favorite thing to cook? But for me, it's one of my favorite questions because I am in the hospitality industry, and hospitality is inherently me. And we will give people the shirt off of our backs to make them feel comfortable and welcome in our space. The literal word for hospitality in Arabic is hasanat dayafe. Hasanat are the good deeds that we collect throughout life to try to get into heaven, right? And so you need a lot of good deeds, and you need to collect as many as you can. A dayaf or a dayaf adyuf is to give them to your guests to make them feel welcome in your space. So when you think about the levity of how important hospitality is, my favorite dish to cook is the one that's going to make you feel the happiest, the one that's going to remind you of your childhood, the one that's going to remind you of your teta or your sido or being back home. Because for a lot of us, we can't go back home.
Returning to Ramadan, I know it's a while off, but Eid is at the end of the holiday. Do you have particular dishes that you'll be preparing for that time?
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing a celebration of sorts at the restaurant. For us, it's always about what's in season, what's local. For me personally, growing up, we always did a whole lamb during Eid. So odds are we'll be doing lamb in some way, shape, or format. That's the go-to for Eid.
There's some excitement here in the studio just as we hear about this dish. And I want to discuss your restaurant before we let you go. Saffron des Trois opened in 2019. How has it changed over time?
I hate the word pivot, but it's had to pivot so many times. We opened, things were kind of slow, and then all of a sudden this slew of awards came in from Eater's Best New Restaurant, a James Beard nomination for Best New Restaurant in the country, our top 10, Free Press top 10, all this stuff. And it was great. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, hey, by the way, here's COVID. So we shut down. And this is, I think, how the restaurant changed me, not necessarily how the restaurant has changed, but that restaurant is a living, breathing piece of its community. And it changed me because we did 110,000 meals in 2020 for people in need, and we were giving them away. And I remember one day our Google rating dropped from 4.8 down to almost a 3.9 or 3.8 or something like that. And when you start giving people real food and they're used to really just processed stuff, they just don't get it at first, right? And I remember I wanted to quit doing it. I was like, we're done. If people aren't going to appreciate all this hard work I'm putting in. And that day we had a homeless guy come in, and he's like, hey, can I clean up or do some dishes just for a couple bucks? And I was like, I'm sorry, it's COVID. I can't just let you in the building, but have you eaten today? And he's like, no. So he sat down on the curb. We brought out a couple meals. He and I sat there and talked, and all of a sudden this grown man started to cry. And I looked at him and I said, what's wrong? And he goes, honestly, I just got out of prison. I've been up and down trying to find a job, and you're the first person to treat me like I'm a human being. And in that moment, I knew that Saffron was more than just a restaurant. And it didn't matter what Google said I knew what we were. And that was important to us. And we kept going, and we did even more meals. And so Saffron has always been a reflection of the Detroit community that it sits in. And it will always continue to be that.
Chef Omari Anani is the owner of Saffron des Trois, a restaurant in Detroit serving up Moroccan cuisine. Chef Anani, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro. Ramadan Kareem.
Thank you.
up, we'll revisit a conversation in which Tia and Robin attempt to uncover why we're seeing so many airplane crashes. Stay right there. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Kerry Jr. II. A string of high-profile air crashes has the attention of many, and it's heightened concerns about flying nowadays. In this next conversation, Tia and Robin spoke with an aviation historian and former commercial air pilot about what we're seeing.
You're nervous to fly right now. You're likely not alone. The last 2 months have been marked by a string of airplane crashes and incidents. In January, an American Airlines aircraft collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter at Reagan Washington National Airport. All 67 people on both aircraft died. It was the first time in 15 years that a U.S. airline had a fatal crash. 2 days later, a medevac jet nosedived onto a busy Philadelphia street. The plane exploded. 7 people died. Then in Toronto, a Delta aircraft crashed and flipped. It skidded down the tarmac upside down before coming to a stop. No one died, but the crash left 21 people injured. Now, these are just some recent high-profile incidents that have captured headlines and deepened people's anxieties about flying right now.
And Robin, this year so far, there have been 19 fatal accidents in the skies. That's according to data from the National Transportation Safety Board. And now those numbers are actually lower than the same time period for 2024 and for 2023. So how safe is it to fly right now? And could it become less safe given the Trump administration's recent firings of hundreds of FAA employees? Here to discuss all this is Daniel Bubb. He's a former airline pilot, an aviation historian, and a professor of history and politics at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Professor Bubb, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning, Tia and Robin. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we get into some of the plane crashes and recent incidents we've just discussed, let's start with the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. That was a defining moment for the airline industry.
Yes, it sure was. What it did is it lowered fares and enabled lower fare carriers to enter the industry, because prior to that time, there were about 5 major carriers that were dominating about 80 to 90% of the market. And fares are relatively expensive. So when President Jimmy Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act on October 31st of 1978, that brought in a lot of other airlines, which increased competition. It required these major carriers to lower their fares so that more people could fly. And that, of course, increased the demand for air travel and also put some stress on our air traffic system and a need for more air traffic controllers and a way for airlines and the air traffic control system to handle this increased demand.
And now, despite the number of air carriers shrinking so dramatically in recent years, the number of aircraft in American airspace is higher than ever. So what's sparked this huge rise, and has it made incidents in the air more likely?
So some people call it COVID-19 air travel, kind of retaliation, where people want to fly, but they couldn't because many of us were isolated in our homes because of COVID-19. And so people basically save their money and then they want to fly, and they still want to fly. So air travel demand remains very high. But I think one very important thing for people to keep in mind is think of the thousands of flights that happen every single day where nothing goes wrong. And I think that's testament to the strength of our air traffic system. It's not perfect. It needs improvement. But overall, we seem to be doing pretty well.
And we're actually going to chat with an air traffic controller a little bit later on the show. But Professor Bubb, that brings us to recent plane crashes, the fatal collision in January between an American Airlines aircraft and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter at Reagan Washington National Airport. It did kill 67 people. And it was the first time in 15 years we saw a commercial crash of this magnitude. So what was going through your mind when you learned about it?
So the thing that was going through my mind is first, as I tell everybody, no matter who is involved in any crash or any incident, is be sure to wait for the NTSB report to come out, because the NTSB investigators, the FAA investigators, have access to data and equipment that we don't. And so lots of times they can determine, what happened to very, fine detail, whereas we can't. And so I would just caution everybody to, first of all, wait until the NTSB report comes out, and it could take months, perhaps even a couple of years. So we have to be patient. But based on the little tidbits that I've seen that the NTSB released, it sounds like there was a little bit of kind of what we call stepping on each other with the aircraft microphone between the Black Hawk helicopter pilot and the air traffic controller. And so it sounded like they missed a critical communication or instruction there, which sounds like it contributed to this particular crash.
It was just a cascading effect of errors that happened.
Yeah. And any pilot will tell you that Reagan Airport airspace is incredibly congested. It's very busy. You have a lot of commercial aircraft coming into the airport. You have a lot of helicopters flying at low altitudes. And so it's just a very busy, very kind of highly stressed air traffic system there. And the idea behind building Dulles Airport was to really prompt the closing of Reagan National Airport. But because Congress finds, Reagan Airport to be so convenient and they wanted to keep it open, that's what they've been doing. So we're going to have to figure out a way to really change the air traffic system around Reagan to basically make it safer.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about some recent high-profile plane crashes in the U.S. Our guest is Daniel Bubb. He's a former airline pilot, an aviation historian, and a professor of politics and history at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Professor Bubb, now you believe the airline industry does need a major overhaul to keep people safe and to keep costs down. What should that look like? So
I think one of the first things that happened is the need. For quite some time, we had a shortage of pilots. And it sounds from what I've heard in the most recent statistics that I have seen is that we've done a really good job of filling those positions. Some airlines, in fact, are not hiring anymore right now because their classes are full. They're training their pilots. So I think in that regard, that was really kind of step number one. Step number two is trying to figure out how to make our air traffic system even safer. Even though air traffic control classes are full right now, we're still short 1,800 air traffic controllers, which concerns me because that puts added stress on air traffic controllers. They work overtime, they work 6-day shifts, and you start getting into a very critical factor there, which is fatigue, and that can be very dangerous. So I'm concerned with the Trump administration placing a freeze on federal hiring. That means that we may not be able to fill the rest of those positions anytime soon, which is very concerning to me.
What about the industry itself? I'm thinking about airline staff pilots. I'm thinking about when I worked as part of an airline ground crew in Wyoming, and the airport there was surrounded by mountains. It was located in a national park, and that meant we saw some very dramatic weather. But many of the pilots seemed resolved to land those planes. I would open up the aircraft and see some bloodshot, weary eyes of the pilots after they landed in bad weather. And for me as a ground crew worker, I felt the pressure from the airlines to send planes off on time. So I can only imagine the pressure pilots were feeling to land aircraft.
There is a considerable pressure. I mean, if you think about it, also being a commercial pilot is a stressful job because you have to safely get your passengers from point A to point B. And there are days when you're going to have flight delays, particularly if you have inclement weather. That adds to a very long day. That's why the FAA has a requirement for what they call crew rest. You can't fly more than 8 hours for your particular shift. It's mandatory rest for really good reasons. So that's why the FAA has done that. And it's also imperative upon the captain of that particular flight to determine, whether it's safe to fly. Maybe the crew is really pushing up close against that crew rest mandatory time constraint and may end up delaying or canceling the flight, which is entirely up to their discretion because at the end of the day, the captain is responsible for everything that happens on that flight.
That's right. And there are widespread effects then for other crew members as well, who also are responsible for passenger safety. I realize that statistically speaking, you believe it is still extremely safe to fly. But I wonder, do you worry then it could become less safe? You mentioned the Trump administration's firing of FAA workers and the fact that we are so short-staffed as a country when it comes to air traffic controllers.
I still think the air travel remains very safe, and I would still encourage people to fly for a couple of reasons. First, you have the best trained pilots who are flying those commercial aircraft. You have the best air traffic controllers working the air traffic system. So I think the air traffic system will remain safe. It'll be very safe to fly. However, I would encourage the Trump administration to really consider filling those positions just so that we're not placing unneeded stress, additional stress on air traffic controllers because it already is a very stressful job. So I would encourage them to think about ways to, hire more air traffic controllers, which I suspect they're doing because I know Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, has been working on that. So I think they'll do it. It's just going to take time. The other thing, too, that I think is important for people to remember is it takes a little bit of time for air traffic controllers to become experienced. They're not going to be put in a major busy airport like Detroit Wayne International Airport, and they have to build that proficiency and demonstrate it before they're able to work in busier airports.
Professor Daniel Bubb is a former airline pilot and aviation historian, and he teaches politics and history at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Professor Bubb, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Coming up in the next hour, we will hear conversations about the DTE Energy price hikes, President Trump's attacks on the transgender community, and Detroit fashion, both new and old. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us. It's the Metro on WDET Detroit Public Radio. I'm Kerry Jr. II, and I'm here with you to review some of our top conversations. This next conversation is one about the DTE Energy price hikes. We talk about what they are, what's happening, and what you can do to save yourself some money. Take a listen.
You've heard of housing and food insecurity. What about energy insecurity? That's when a person can't afford energy for basic needs. Powering appliances and heating and cooling your home are out of reach. It's an issue that touches every facet of life. It can make it hard to hold down a job, hard to get to school, hard to stay healthy. DTE Energy recently filed another request for its plan to raise rates. We should note that request will take multiple months of reviews. Residents wouldn't see a rate hike till next year if it's approved. Now, this rate hike request comes just months after Michigan regulators approved another DTE rate increase. In January, the utility was okayed to raise rates by $217 million. Rate hikes aren't the only thing worrying advocates. Shutoffs for non-payment are a big part of DTE operations. A recent report by the Center for Biological Diversity says last year, DTE shut off electricity 150,000 times for residents who couldn't pay their bills between January and September.
Yeah, Robin. The report also says DTE customers already have some of the highest residential rates in the country. The average bill is 17% more than that of the Great Lakes region average. In a recent statement, DTE's Ryan Lowry said DTE and its agency partners offer a variety of assistance options to help those in need. And last year alone, we connected customers to nearly $144 million in energy assistance. He said DTE was proud to see Governor Whitmer sign 4 pieces of legislation into law to double the funding available for low-income Michiganders, which is under the Michigan Energy Assistance Program. Advocates say increasing energy costs, shutoffs, and DTE's reliance on fossil fuels are a big problem. So today we're asking how folks can have more power, so to speak. Kari Frazier is with Solidarity. That's a nonprofit working to make energy accessible and affordable to all. Kari, welcome to the Metro.
Welcome. How are you all?
Doing really well. How are you?
Good. Definitely always great to talk energy democracy, especially from the Solidarity lens.
And I love that because we are going to get into what that actually means. But first off, Kari, briefly give us a sense of what you've been hearing on the ground from residents about their energy costs. How are energy rates affecting people locally? We just heard about those shutoffs. Like, what's going on?
Well, definitely in the shutoff notice, people need to understand that when you deal with that, you're not just dealing with your energy being cut. You're dealing with the fee to turn it back on. You're going to probably exhaust whatever programs are available. And then the programs to even engage in a lot of this, oftentimes residents will say can be very intrusive. All of the information and data that they're asking for and identification, it can just only add to the stressors that you're already facing. We know the bills are coming. You pay a bill and you're looking at the very next bill as you're paying the one that you just paid. As I just got my new bills in and I'm looking at, hundreds of dollars because that's what we're all facing. So on the ground, people are very frustrated because of the cost, and not just the cost. We really have to look at the product that's being delivered. We're paying for the highest prices of energy across the nation, close, and also the reliability of this service. Anytime it's a storm, the wind last week, people are wondering, will I even have energy to hold on to? And then also just the disrespect of this corporation when your energy does go out. I mean, the small stipend that you are given is something that Solidarity fought for, but it's nothing like if you're in a business that many people, such as myself, work from home right now, or many people actually work from home with their job, and you'll be out for 2 days. So it's the cost that we're paying, always paying more, and the fact that it's not that reliable, it just doesn't work out.
I thought about that last week when we had strong winds. I thought, let me hurry up and charge everything. Let me make sure everything's good to go because we will lose power. It will happen. It's not a if, it's just a when because we know it's going to happen. But speaking of Solidarity, you used the term energy democracy. Can you explain what that actually means a little bit and what it means to Metro Detroit?
Okay, so first off, I have to really get into the story of Solidarity to explain what this is. So Solidarity starts as any community organizing effort. It starts in response to all of the street lights being captured from Highland Park. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Highland Park does not have street lights because of disputes between, at the time, the Highland Park administration and DTE. So that immediately leads for residents to be left in the darkness when you would expect streetlights to happen. Residents say, what can we do? Let's go about getting some solar streetlights. That seems like a very practical response. Let's move on that. Solar power is something that we could do. Not exactly, because one of the biggest lobbying against us having access for solar power is actually DTE. So energy democracy actually empowers us to choose how we want to power our communities, how we want to empower our homes, how we want to choose, hence the whole concept of it being democratic, what we want for our own energy. And that's the other thing that makes these rate increases all the time even worse. It's the fact that we don't even have a choice. This is a natural monopoly. So as a natural monopoly, they always are raising their rates. We don't have the choice for solar power. We don't have the options that people across the nation have. And even the option of looking at this being something that is public controlled. So residents of Highland Park that are still paying bills for DTE for their homes still have to deal with the challenge of not having streetlights because of an act that was done over a decade ago. And Solidarity has been organizing first on the grounds, grassroots, very pragmatic, but it became very political and policy driven, as just trying to get a solar streetlight is something that you're going to have to contact so many people to move on.
And just really quickly, because folks, it's a really actually cool project that happened in Highland Park with Solidarity and the partners that you use. I can't think of the name, but I remember covering the story, the streetlights going in, Mama Shoe, and the work that was happening in Highland Park just to power one neighborhood, one block.
Yes.
Have you seen any movement since then? Have we seen more, or is it still something that's uphill battle trying to get these solar?
It is always a battle, but that's a battle that knowing that community organizing against especially strong corporate interests is going to be a fight. This year, we're going to do something grand and grandiose on a block in Highland Park, and it's going to take place in June. We're going to do a street light flashlight party. So we're welcoming people to give, and we're going to empower different blocks and communities throughout Highland Park. And we've been doing so many different efforts with other partners like We Want Green and others that have stood by, Parker Village, and definitely you uplifted Mama Shoe and Avalon Village.
Yes.
So the partners and the work of Highland Park and Detroit and being active about how we can get renewable, clean energy that is affordable for people, this is something that everybody buys into.
Yes, and staying on the topic of democratic control over our power, DTE would say that Michigan residents technically control what happens to its power because we have the in-state Michigan Public Service Commission, which determines whether rate hikes happen or not. What do you make of this perspective?
It's one of those things that is very savvy political statement. These are appointed figures, so appointed by the governor. So you can sort of say that that's some democratic control. And then you look at the amount of lobbying that DTE spends every year throughout the pockets of so many politicians. And you often say, why are they lobbying this much for politicians? And here's another classic one. Why are they spending so much money on commercials? Why are they trying to sway public opinion when I don't even have an option? I don't have an option of what to choose. So why are they always looking to influence and sell me on them being a steward in community? And all of the community efforts that they do, which is great community efforts, but what would be better if you're not shutting off people's power? It would be better if we could just keep the rates at what they're at. Every time they're asking for hundreds of millions of dollars. So the rate that just went into effect that's impacting our bills right now, $217 million, I believe. But originally they were asking for $500 million plus. So now they're looking to get that and get extra. And that's just the electric and also the gas. So every chance that DTE can ask for a rate increase for this Michigan Public Service Commission, they are asking and usually getting. So it's taking a lot of organizing from groups like Solidarity and many others to work and always advocate for the people to say that this is already ridiculous. And I already hear the voice of so many people that work with DTE saying that a lot of the advocacy and a lot of this money is going to be to make it safer, make it renewable, make it clean, make it better. What would make it better is if we look at the skyrocketing profits, especially like coming out of COVID, that they were making, the money that their shareholders are getting. So this is a place where a corporation that has control over something that doesn't have any competition, they fight against competition coming to it, and they're always raising rates of residents, which is impacting Black and working communities the most. Not fair.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about rising energy costs in Metro Detroit and how people can take the power back. Our guest is Kari Frazier of Solidarity. That's a nonprofit working to make energy accessible and affordable to all. Now, Kari, the recent report we mentioned at the top by the Center for Biological Diversity argues that DTE is uniquely predatory toward its low-income customers. In 2023, it required over 48,000 residents to pay for their bills in cash. And it called this policy vindictive. What do you make of that?
I would say that making a statement like that is opinion-based. And with that opinion, and this is Kari's opinion of that, I just hear like so many voices coming in that would be a lot of the allies through our community, where DTE would say, well, we support THAW and we support this church and we support this effort and we have all of these options. The reality is I kind of agree with that opinion that was raised. DTE has gone out its way, even from when I was younger, to distance itself from actually having one-on-one interactions with people. Even my neighborhood, like a lot of neighborhoods, so much work was done on my block and a notice was sent, but these notices are sent with to be determined dates. Just the way that DTE goes out of its way to not interact with customers as if we're human. The offices that would be filled and sometimes some of the toughest experiences were at least a way to talk to a person. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we feel as people paying for this service. If I feel as though I'm talking to a call matrix, or it's going to be very digital to even have a discussion about how I can keep my lights on. And there's other things that DTE has done that have been very predatory too. The rate increase between the hours of 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. that I don't think many people remember or know about.
Right.
But it's like, okay, but the rest of the day, everything else will cost less. These are the hours when homework is happening. You're going to be most active. You're going to be cooking dinner. And this is when you're going to charge me more for my energy.
Advocates are saying that this is also hitting low-income folks, especially hard, vulnerable folks, to have these certain hours for higher rates. I want to talk for a moment about bills in the State House to launch community solar projects that have had bipartisan support. But energy utilities, DTE, and Consumers Energy have lobbied against these bills. DTE spent $650,000 lobbying in 2024. Now, they have made the argument, and these bills have not moved forward. The most recent ones are considered dead in the House. They've made the argument that they would raise electricity rates. It sounds like it's going to be hard to pass this kind of legislation. What other clear paths forward do you see?
So this is where it takes that boots on the ground work, Fannie Lou Hamer type effort. Because community solar is going to be an effort where the onus is really on myself, working in communication, making it direct and clear for a lot of people. Getting a home solar ready takes a lot of steps, especially when we think of the housing stock throughout the city of Detroit. The housing stock and what needs to happen and making sure that this can happen will be a lot of steps just for solar power to happen in a home. Furthermore, the buy-in of the energy democracy of community solar. But similar to community land trusts, we can think of this as like a community energy trust. That's going to be the framework that I'm going to be pushing myself and many others that work with Solidarity to frame this in the right lens, because we're looking at systems across the nation fall apart that we can no longer rely on. So we need to be more community-based, period. So the sooner that we can start on this path and move on that path, the better. A community solar model similar to what I see as a community land trust will have buy-in from all members in different ways of how we can pull our power. Because the minute that we get 1 or 2 solar panels on the block, that's going to help everyone else on the block. And the more that we can see that functionality, see the impact now that you have money to spend on whatever your other home repair is, your entrepreneurial pursuits or vacation, whatever you may do. Now you're no longer stressed with the energy burden that many of us always face.
Let's stay on the topic real quick before we let you go of solar panels and more broadly solar farms. About 2/3 of Americans want to prioritize developing wind and solar power over fossil fuels. That's according to Pew Research Center. The cost to produce those forms of energy has gone down, but renewable energy requires 10 times the land area as coal or gas. And we know that there's NIMBYism, i.e. not in my backyard, getting in the way of this kind of development. How do you convince people who don't want to see solar farms or wind turbines in their backyards?
Well, this is one of those things where, along with DTE, and I think that they're kind of in that space, the city of Detroit's efforts with the neighborhood solar, which I don't see as a community solar project. It looks as if DTE will be the contractor that will execute the solar for that project. Now, that's a Kari Frazier statement, and all signs look in that direction. It's going to be inclusive. The way you make it not in my backyard is include people in the process. Right? So the neighborhood solar project doesn't give power to the neighborhood, doesn't give power to the people. If you explain and share with people that say, like, look, we're going to get this solar farm here and now your bills are going to go down 60%, I believe you're going to get a lot of people to buy into what that project is. So it must be inclusive. The challenge becomes a lot of the places where we look at as desolate or empty space are from communities that are struggling with a lot of those economic stressors. So they're not included in the process. So you need to spend more effort, more time organizing and make sure that it's completely plain and you're sharing with whatever the benefits that you're looking for is shared with that community.
Kari Frazier is with Solidarity. That's a nonprofit working to make energy accessible and affordable to all. Kari, thank you for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
The Metro will keep you updated on DTE's proposed rate increases. We did reach out to DTE for this conversation, and stay tuned for future coverage when we hope to be speaking with some representatives from that utility.
Coming up, we'll listen back to a conversation with a representative of the American Civil Liberties Union about President Trump's policies and how those policies are impacting transgender people. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Kerry Jr. II. In this next conversation, Tia and Robin sit down with a representative of the American Civil Liberties Union to discuss how President Trump's policies are impacting transgender people.
President Trump has been waging an assault on transgender people. Since taking office, he's signed a series of executive orders to dismantle their rights. These moves aren't surprising. Trump used ugly rhetoric on the campaign trail to target this small minority of people, and it's really small. Transgender young people and adults account for less than 2% of the U.S. population. But advocates warn that attacking trans rights opens the door to rolling back other people's rights. Before we look at the Trump administration's attack on human rights and the bigger implications, we want to know what it means to be transgender.
Yeah, Tia, the Human Rights Campaign explains that a transgender person is someone whose sex assigned at birth is different from who they know they are on the inside. So that could include someone who's medically transitioned, so their physical appearance aligns with their understanding of their gender. It also includes people who don't solely identify as male or female. To discuss why Trump is targeting this small minority of Americans and why attacks on transgender rights are relevant to everyone, Jay Kaplan joins us now. He's a staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union of Michigan, where he leads the LGBTQ project. Jay, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll look at the landscape for LGBTQ rights in Michigan in a moment. But first, could you discuss the federal policy changes enacted by the Trump administration that are targeting the rights of transgender people?
Well, I would characterize it as an all-out assault on members of the transgender community. from efforts to deny people life-saving, medical necessary health care, access to accurate federal identity documents, the ability to attend school in a safe and supportive learning environment, the ability to be able to serve in the military, and the ability to participate in school activities like sports in accordance with your gender identity. The purpose of these executive orders are basically to erase existence of transgender people and to no longer acknowledge who they are and what their authentic identity is, and to deny them basic and essential rights that are accorded to all other people. And it's very distressing seeing this, and it's really based on a most cynical political calculation that by attacking a very small minority, as you mentioned, that many in this country might not feel that they don't know somebody who is transgender, or they may not understand what it means to be transgender. They can use this to their political gain, and it's lacking a sense of moral compass and decency about how we as a country treat individuals. And I think it certainly raises a number of constitutional issues, and that's why we're seeing many legal challenges to these executive orders in the federal courts.
Jay, human rights advocates say taking away the rights of one group of people portends the same for other groups of people. And I realize this is something you're focused on. Can you talk about that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely true. If we allow one group, that a marginalized group, to have their rights being taken away from them, and we're silent and we don't say anything, it just presents, more opportunities for some of, for this administration and other people who would like to see other people denied rights, other marginalized groups to be denied rights. And just as an example, by taking away transgender rights, this also sets the stage to take away rights of people who identify as being lesbian or gay, because the same motivating factor of discrimination against the LGBTQ community as a whole is the issue of sex, people not conforming to society's notions or stereotypes about how somebody is supposed to look, how they're supposed to act, who they're supposed to love based on the gender that was assigned to them at birth. And so if we allow transgender people to have their rights be taken away from them or to be denied access to rights accorded to other people, it's only natural that we'll see that same trajectory with the lesbian and gay population and other marginalized populations. There's a saying that says that people will vote against their own interests if a politician or elected official can make them feel superior to some other group. Even if it harms them themselves, they will go ahead and do this. And I think that's part of the strategy, the political motivation behind some of the things we're seeing, not only with the trans community, but also, in terms of demonizing immigrants and having policies that call for the mass deportation of people, even if they might be here illegally, or they haven't committed any crimes. So I think it all runs in that same trajectory.
You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're talking about the Trump administration's attack on transgender rights and the broader implications. Our guest is Jay Kaplan. He's a staff attorney with the ACLU of Michigan, specializing in LGBTQ rights. Now, there are a lot of people who are afraid of trans people. How do you approach conversations with those who fear the change in social norms that we're seeing right now? How do you combat those lies and misinformation you're talking about?
I think the first thing I would say is that transgender people have been around for centuries, and they've lived their lives, and they live their authentic lives. And most likely, some of these people who express fears about being around transgender people have probably been around transgender people and have shared spaces with transgender people. They just might not have known it. And I would also encourage conversations. If you don't know something about what it means to be transgender, what gender identity means, how does one live with the diagnosis of what's called gender dysphoria, when your gender identity doesn't match the gender assigned at birth, to ask questions and to have those conversations. I always encourage those conversations. No question is an ignorant question or a wrong question. It's important that we get facts and that we get the information we need in order to make intelligent and humane choices about what kind of policy we want to see from our government.
And Jay, just thinking about the state of Michigan as a whole and what we're seeing happen in the state of Michigan, when you rate on a scale of 1 to 10, how friendly do you believe the state of Michigan is right now for the LGBTQ plus community?
We've made a lot of progress in the last, I would say, half a decade in terms of we now have comprehensive civil rights protections for LGBTQ people. We have some very good identity document policies for transgender people. We have a very good Medicaid policy with regards to accessing gender-affirming health care. So those are all very, very positive things. And yet we are also seeing efforts. We've just since January, the majority party in the Michigan House has introduced, I believe it's now up to 5 anti-trans pieces of legislation. And the other thing I think is very important, given the progress that we've made, it's also very important for our leaders who have been allies to the LGBTQ community, particularly with the transgender community. They need to speak up. They need to speak out. There's been a certain timidity from some of our elected officials with regards to these executive orders and even regards to legislation that has been introduced in Michigan. It's important more than ever for our allies and our friends to speak up and speak out against these things.
And Jay, we were, referring to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, which, was extended to protect LGBTQ plus folks. So when we talk a little bit about that expansion, if you could expand on the significance on it and as well the significance of seeing those bills pop up in the Michigan State House.
It's incredibly significant because right now there's only 23 states that have civil rights laws that explicitly cover sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression. It only took Michigan 46 years to finally pass the legislation, but it's important that we have that because we can use our state civil rights laws to challenge some of these discriminatory executive orders. An executive order is not a law. A president is not a king, and he can't just decide, I don't like, states having civil rights laws that protect certain people against discrimination. I want them to be discriminated against. It doesn't work that way. And executive orders are subject to legal challenges. So what's so helpful in Michigan, unlike, the other 27 states that don't have these protections, we can say to different entities, you still have an obligation to comply with our state civil rights laws. These executive orders have not given you a license to openly discriminate against transgender people.
And Jay, before we get down to the end of the conversation here, I hear you talking about the lawmakers who need to stand up and speak out a little bit more in support of the LGBTQ plus community, but especially trans folks here in our state. But, oftentimes we hear folks who are just afraid to speak out because of their own repercussions that they'll face or, what they may endure. Can you talk about how folks can I guess, stand up without that fear of losing friends or family or whatever it may be? But can you talk about going and fighting through that fear?
Sure. And I think there's some political fear after the 2024 election. There were certain pundits that said, if the Democrats weren't supportive of transgender people, they might have won more elections. That's not reflective in actual polling that was done and surveys that were done. But I would say that, you have to look at what your values are. And if you believe in treating people fairly and with dignity and that if you think it's cruel to take away health care from people, life-saving health care, to deny people the ability to be able to go to school and to be safe at school and to be regarded who they are, maybe you need to question, if those things are okay with you. But if you feel strongly that that's wrong, you need to stand up for that, because otherwise, why are you in public office? What is your purpose in being there? It shouldn't just be to be reelected year after year after year. It's to actually do good for the public good. And I would say for people who are outside of the political spectrum, it's about what are your morals? What are your ethics that you believe in? And if you believe that something is wrong, then you need to have that conversation. We don't have to always call out people. We can try to call them in and try to get an understanding. Why do they feel that way? Where are they getting that information? And hopefully we can provide them with some actual factual information, so they hopefully will question some of their perceptions about this community. Transgender people, like everybody else, want to be able to live their lives. They want to live their lives. They want to have a good paying job. They want to be able to afford their bills. They want to have friends. They want to have families. They have the same goals and aspirations as everybody else. They're not different the way that certain politicians are trying to make them out to be, and they're not trying to threaten anybody else's existence. You can hold on to whatever your gender identity is or what your sexual orientation is. They just want to exist as their authentic selves.
Jay Kaplan is a staff attorney at ACLU of Michigan, where he leads the LGBTQ project. Jay, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
Detroit is known for a lot of things. It's food, music, people, but fashion just doesn't crack the list for many. Up next, we'll revisit a conversation that explains why Detroit fashion shouldn't be overlooked. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Kerry Jr. II. And in this next conversation, Tia and Robin talked with a local journalist about some of the classic Detroit looks from the city's history.
Con Santori Davison is a freelance journalist and contributing writer for the Metro Times. Con, welcome back to the Metro.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So you recently took to TikTok to explain how Detroit fashion has changed. I want to play a clip of that right now.
Folks don't wear coats no more. Like when I drop my daughter off at school, nobody has on a coat, none of the kids. When I'm covering concerts and album release parties and after parties, these young folks don't wear a coat now. Okay, one thing is that it's cold as a mug outside, but the other part is that, the coat used to be the main part of your fashion statement. That was the highlight of your fit, was your coat.
Coats really were central to Detroit style back in the day, Con. So what were the big coat brands? What did that style look like? Why did it matter?
Oh, it was fabulous. It was a wonderful time to be alive, because you can say sheepskins, leather shearling coats for like more formal wear. And then when you get into maybe a little more sporty or less formal, Pelly Pale leather jackets, Alwasan leather jackets. And the beauty of this is, you just pointed out, Aretha and Dietrich, is that the clothes we wore either had Detroit roots, or the places we bought them from were quintessential to Detroit. Mark Buchanan, Pelly Pale is Detroit. Alwasan is Detroit. And so, these were, we identified by the brands. They were homegrown brands. And again, your coat, like, you could have an off day. Hey, you didn't get a chance to get to the iron, didn't get a chance to get to the cleaners. But if you had a fire coat on and a nice pair of shoes, you saved your whole outfit. You was going to have a good night that night.
That was it. That was all that you needed. And we were a lot warmer back then, too. Why do you think things changed over time? Why do people no longer wear coats to show off their style in Detroit in that same way?
I think a part of it is just convenience. Just to be fair, we have a culture now when it comes to stuff like Uber. You see a lot of you go to a hip hop concert, kids are jumping out of Ubers with no coats running into the venue, instead of just like parking a quarter mile away and walking. The same thing with school events. So car culture played, and rideshare played a role in that. And then the other half of it was just that, formal fashion in Detroit and overall has kind of been on the decline, and streetwears took over. And so, remember, a lot of us, we were partying during the no jeans, no gym shoes days. So we had on slacks or Rockports or Gator shoes if we was really trying to do it big. You know what I mean? So that era is gone, and so now it's ripped jeans, it's more sneakers, t-shirts, sweatshirts. So it's just kind of the way fashion went.
Yeah, again, we're colder. Lots of rips and tears in our clothes. Now, what are the Detroit brands that people are wearing most these days that you're observing?
313 is a great brand. They do a lot of sportswear, t-shirts, a lot of great hats. Regaro does make a lot of awesome jackets. Of course, Detroit versus everybody. And you have the Wealthy brand. Anybody ever see anybody with a t-shirt on with a box logo with Wealthy in it? And so, and the great thing about it now is that if you go to any kind of concert or venue, you'll probably see the kids, and I say kids meaning folks under 30, with just as many Detroit brands on as other brands. Like, they may have on a pair of Nike Air Jordan shoes, but they got on a 313 shirt. They got on a Detroit versus everybody t-shirt. You know what I mean? So there is like a different kind of pride that the younger generation has with how they've embraced these homegrown brands from Detroit. And so I think that's really a beautiful thing. And also the newer sport jackets. Like, man, I've never seen this many different kinds of Pistons and remixed Tigers jackets. Like, it's not what it was, but again, things change and everything gets embraced in its own time.
You mentioned that some of this you feel is birthed from convenience. Kids are getting into the Uber and getting dropped off right outside the venue, not having to walk multiple blocks, and so there's no need for that coat anymore. Where else do you think the shift came from when we see this pivot from Pele coats to some of the athletic jackets you're talking about and so on?
I think the general, from me having 4 kids, I can attest that kids just believe a coat is bulky. They'd even rather just sacrifice being cold for those 2 to 3 minutes or less for the sake of not having to walk around with a bulky coat. And I get it. That's actually always been the case, because you got to remember, in those days, if your coat was too expensive, Coat Check wouldn't check it. You got on a mink from Elmar or Dietrich and be like, no, we don't accept that coat. And you stuck with it the whole night, but it was okay because your freshness was the most important anyway. So if you had to be hot, walk around with that coat, you were probably, you definitely one of the best dressed folks in there. So you were willing to just bear with it,
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're speaking with freelance journalist Tori Davison about what Detroit fashion is and how it's changed over the last 40 years. And we definitely want to hear from you. What defines Detroit style? The number is 313-577-1019. We're going to bring someone in from the phone line. Sal on the east side. Sal, what's your number one piece of Detroit fashion?
Hey, what up, though?
What up, though?
Well, what up, though? Yeah, well, my number one piece, that you can never go wrong with, is a fresh white pair of Air Force Ones. That's universal, west side and east side. I look at Detroit, how we dress in our style is a representation of us. You know what I'm saying? It also depends. I think it's like art in a way. You know what I mean? It's self-expression. You know what I mean? I feel like depending on how you feel that day, you may dress, you dress accordingly. And then also you got to throw in the age gap, the generation gaps. Because, when I was coming up, we ain't never, wear no sagging jeans showing our butt. How you going to have on skinny jeans, but yet you're dragging, they're sagging and you're showing your underwear? That was unheard of, you feel me? Unheard of where I come from, Back in my day, we had, top tens, some shell toe Adidas, fat shoelaces, jingle boots, stuff like that. And again, East Side dress different from the West Side. You know what I mean?
Which is
but
true.
I think it's all an expression of art and who you are. Now, these young kids nowadays, they're taking it to a different level. You feel me? So, it's just different, and that's just what I believe it is. It's an expression of one's individuality. In Detroit, we've always been stylish. I was in at a barbershop one day, and I looked on it, and it had old Mayor Coleman Young, and he was getting his shoes shined. And he had the stylish Dobb hat on and some Stacey Adams. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's Detroit. You know what I mean?
Yes, Saul. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Saul, for your call this morning. I'm thinking about just everything that you're talking about. And number one, Robin and I talk about the skinny jeans often. And it's just like, it's a lot of ripped jeans, skinny jeans hanging around here.
And then as Saul was noting, like, how do you still show your behind?
Yeah, how are your pants still sagging?
With your skinny jeans. This is a conundrum.
It is. Con, bringing you back into the conversation and thinking about what Saul had to say there. Can you talk a little bit about your style growing up? Like, what were some of your go-to pieces when you were in school?
Oh, man. 90s were baggy. You know what I mean? That 90s, you bought, if the jeans weren't baggy, you just bought an extra size, and it was Timberlands, it was Adidas, it was Jordans, it was Feelers, but really the most identifying mark were the baggy clothes, were the polo shirts. And I always tell people, the bagginess, it wasn't just fashion. That bagginess, it made you bigger. It brought like an extra presence to you. You felt like you were like walking on top of the world with your Timberlands and your baggy clothes and your Pelly Pale jacket. You had this extra presence about yourself, man. But things come and go. So yeah, baggy jeans kind of transitioned into not so baggy, the skinny jeans, and now we're kind of in all over the place. The skinny jeans is not the predominant thing anymore. You kind of see a mixture of things when you're outside.
And Con, just hearing your rant about the kids and the coats, I saw that on social media, and I was thinking to myself as you were speaking with Robin earlier, I have so many different coats. I am one of those. I think I'm like that holdover from the last generation, where you can kind of tell based on the amount of coats I have, because coats are like you said, you can have on anything underneath, but if your coat and your shoes look good, you're okay.
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah, and if you go to, I know one of the main stores we bought coats from was Donna Sachs. And Donna Sachs still exists, but you can go and the kind of coats that we wore aren't there. And they aren't there because the kids aren't, they aren't buying them. The young adults aren't buying them this generation. There are more sporty jackets, more Pistons, Tigers, and Lions coats like that. More jackets with more, say, cartoon or pop culture things on them. So, I mean, things change.
Things do change. Now, you cover hip hop. There are a lot of prominent Detroiters in hip hop right now. We see Big Sean. I mean, Cash Dow right now has completely, on social media at least, has completely kind of changed over the way women are wearing their hair right now. We see curtain bangs and big curls are coming in because Cash Dow has completely revolutionized that right now. We see Danny Brown and his skater aesthetic, and T Grizzly and Sada Baby. So how are our hip hop stars shaping fashion in Detroit and beyond?
Well, main thing I'm going to go back to specifically, since you brought up our hip hop all stars in the city, is that they've all embraced local brands. Every single one. I have not seen a Detroit hip hop artist just that does not wear a local brand, and so that's important. And the way they wear them is pretty much consistent with how the young adults are wearing clothes. Some baggy, a lot of fitted. Some overly tight or skinny jeans. You see some of as far as the gym shoes, a lot of Jordans, but also a lot of high end, because I remind people, one of the biggest complaint or you hear from parents is that these young adults, these kids wear such expensive clothes. And that's because in fashion, kind of sort of now the Ralph Lauren's and Lacoste's, those brands that were kind of pricey but not too pricey, have kind of been squeezed out a little bit. People are generally opting to pay more money. Going out is competitive, and you're willing to pay that money to stand out, to be the freshest in the room. the freshest shoes in the party, the best coat, the best dress. People are willing to pay a premium for that a little bit now more than they were in yesteryear.
And it's interesting because I do want to touch on the export of men fashion, or just men's fashion in the city of Detroit in general. It's always been one of the ones that has been front and center. We've known about the Gator shoes, or even Henry the Hatter, or even City Slickers. So I'm thinking about just men's fashion in the city of Detroit and the importance that it's held over the years and generations, and where you see it now. Men's fashion, the dapperness of it.
Well, the dapperness of it, like I said, it has fallen second to streetwear. The one thing I hate about it is that, like when Biggie said, "Pink Gators by my Detroit players." We were known, and when I interview, say, out of state artists or people that don't live here in the entertainment business, I always ask them what is their best Detroit memory. And there was a young lady, I can't think of her name right now, but she's an actress from BMF at Snowfall, and she said, I was in a play at Fox Theater in like '89, and all the men had on beaver coats. And that was just the most Detroit thing ever for '89.
I'm sorry.
And the fact that she had remembered that, 3 decades later, because she had never seen nothing like it. Yeah. You only go to the Fox Theater and see multiple men with beaver coats. That is a Detroit thing. That doesn't happen anywhere else. And so that kind of thing has kind of been lost, as to where, even though the younger generation now have their own fashion brands and they wear them, the look is still pretty consistent kind of to what everybody else is doing. So, right now we don't have that Dobbs hat, Gator shoes look that defined us in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And that's, like I said, the one thing I did notice was Cash Doll and her hair, which is popping off on social right now. But other than that, I was thinking, what fashion export is really taking hold, or has taken hold outside of the city of Detroit? And like you're saying, just like most things in the city, we keep it here, we keep it close to our chest, and we don't really let others have it.
Yeah. And we have to understand that because of the internet, everybody's influenced by everything, and it happens with music, it happens in entertainment, everybody's influenced by the world. So a lot of artistic and fashion trends that used to be unique to cities, everything's kind of shared. Everybody's kind of being inspired by everybody else, because we can see what the entire country and entire world is doing and wearing.
Yeah. Con Santori Davison is a freelance journalist and contributing writer. Con, as always, thank you for joining us on the Metro. We look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
That's it for the Metro. The show is produced by Sam Corey, Kerry Jr. II, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender, and our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
WDET isn't just on the radio. Take WDET wherever you go. Stream at WDET.org, tune in with our mobile app, or simply ask your smart speaker to play WDET. It's the sound of Detroit at your fingertips. Simple, easy, everywhere. And don't forget to follow us on social media for exclusive content from your favorite WDET shows. Stay connected to Detroit at WDET.org.